What is the scariest, most terrifying thing that actually exists? Story 1. Exploding head syndrome? It's a lesser-known sleep disorder that can be absolutely terrifying. People who suffer from it will suddenly hear loud, jarring noises, like a gunshot or a loud crash, just as they are falling asleep or waking up. It's called exploding head syndrome because the sensation can feel like your head is actually exploding. The scariest part is that it's not fully understood what causes this disorder, although it's believed to be related to problems with the brain's auditory system. It's also not fully understood how common it is, as many people who experience it may not report it due to embarrassment or fear of being dismissed by medical professionals. Can you imagine how terrifying it would be to suddenly hear a loud noise like a bomb going off, only to realize that it was all in your head? It's no wonder that many people who suffer from this disorder experience extreme anxiety and fear around going to sleep. While there is no known cure for exploding head syndrome, there are some treatments that can help alleviate symptoms. Sleep hygiene practices, like going to bed at the same time every night and avoiding caffeine and alcohol, can be helpful. Additionally, some medications have been used with some success. It's a truly bizarre and unsettling disorder, and one that many people have never even heard of. But for those who suffer from it, the fear and anxiety it can cause can be all too real. Story 2. The Rat King is one of the creepiest things I've ever heard of. Basically, it's a group of rats that become so entangled together by their tails and bodies that they become one big, creepy mess. The Rat King phenomenon is rare and not well known, but it's been documented throughout history. There are even some museums that have preserved rat kings that were found in the wild. Can you imagine coming across a rat king in the dark? It's enough to make your skin crawl. Some people even believe that rat kings are a sign of bad luck or impending doom. It's hard to say exactly how rat kings form, but it's believed that they result from rats living in close proximity and their tails becoming entangled as they move about. Once the rats are entangled, they can't get free and eventually becomes fused together by waste and debris. I don't know about you, but the idea of a group of rats becoming one big writhing mass is enough to give me nightmares. Story 3. Thalassophobia is a fear of the deep, dark sea and everything that lurks in it. The thought of being alone in the vastness of the ocean, with no land in sight, sends shivers down my spine. The unknown creatures that live in the depths of the sea, and the mysteries that lay hidden in its abyss can trigger intense anxiety and fear. Story 4. Oh boy, have you heard of the catacombs of Paris? It's one of the freakiest places on Earth. These underground tunnels span over 200 miles beneath Paris and hold the bones of 6 million people. Legend has it that the catacombs are haunted by spirits and eerie figures lurk in the darkness. If you dare to venture inside, you might never find your way out. Story 5. Definitely the Black Blizzard. It's like a freaking monster from a horror movie, except it's real. When a dust storm hits, it's like the whole world disappears in a cloud of darkness and chaos. You can't see anything, you can't hear anything, and you sure as hell can't escape it. The wind is so strong, it feels like it's gonna rip you apart limb by limb. It's like being in the middle of a freaking apocalypse, and it's all happening right before your eyes. Trust me, you do not wanna mess with the Black Blizzard. Story 6. One of the scariest things that exist is the idea of being lost and alone in an unfamiliar place, especially if it's dark and there's nobody around to help you. This feeling of helplessness and vulnerability can be overwhelming. It was a few years ago, and I was traveling solo in a foreign country. I had been exploring the city all day and decided to take a shortcut back to my hotel. I thought I knew the way, but I quickly realized that I was lost. The streets were dark and empty, and there was nobody around to ask for help. As I wandered through the unfamiliar neighborhood, my anxiety started to raise. I didn't speak the language, and I had no idea where I was. I was afraid of being mugged or worse, and the thought of spending the night on the streets was terrifying. Finally, after what seemed like hours of wandering, I stumbled upon a familiar landmark and was able to navigate my way back to my hotel. That experience left a lasting impression on me. The feeling of being lost and alone in an unfamiliar place is one of the scariest things that I've ever experienced. Story 7. What about the corpse flower? It's a real plant that exists, and it's terrifying in its own right. This thing can grow up to 10 feet tall and smells like rotting flesh. Yes, it smells like a dead body. The fact that something like this exists in the world is mind-boggling. Imagine walking through the woods and coming across a 10-foot-tall flower that smells like death. It's like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I think I'll stick to my houseplants. Story 8. Something truly terrifying is the unpredictability of natural disasters. Whether it's a hurricane, tornado, earthquake, or wildfire, these events can cause widespread devastation, taking lives, destroying homes and communities for years to come. There are some disasters that we can prevent, but some others are out of our control and we can't prevent them. That makes them scarier. Story 9. Encountering a serial killer. These individuals often blend into society, appearing normal and harmless while secretly harboring a deep desire to kill and inflict harm on others. The thought of being targeted and hunted by someone with such a twisted mindset is enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. Story 10. Just the unknown. The fear of the unknown can be a powerful force, triggering intense feelings of anxiety and uncertainty. It's human nature to seek out knowledge and understanding, but sometimes there are things that we simply cannot explain or understand. These unexplainable phenomena can be deeply unsettling, leaving us feeling vulnerable and exposed. Story 11. For me, it's the possibility of a global catastrophic event. There are many potential scenarios that could lead to a catastrophic event that could threaten the survival of the human race, such as supervolcano eruption, a massive asteroid impact, or a global pandemic. The scariest thing about these potential events is that many are largely out of our control. While we can prepare for these scenarios, there is no guarantee that we will be able to prevent them or survive the aftermath. Story 12. One of the scariest things that exists is the idea of being trapped or confined, particularly in situations where escape is impossible. This can take many different forms, from being trapped in a small space to being held against your will by another person. The fear of confinement can be extremely powerful, triggering feelings of anxiety, claustrophobia, and helplessness. Story 13. Have you heard of the cone snail? It's a small, colorful sea creature that you might find on a tropical beach. It looks harmless, but don't be fooled. It's one of the scariest and most dangerous animals out there. Why? Well, the cone snail's venom is no joke. It contains a mix of chemicals that can cause paralysis, intense pain, and even death in humans. And get this, it delivers the venom through a long, needle-like tooth that it can extend from its mouth. So, if you step on one or pick it up, you could be in serious trouble. The really scary thing is that you may not even realize you've been stung at first. The venom can take a while to take effect, and by the time you feel the pain, it could be too late to do anything about it. Story 14. The feeling of isolation and loneliness is one of the scariest things that exist. It can be deeply unsettling to be cut off from the rest of the world, without any means of communication or rescue. Even in our highly interconnected world, where we are constantly bombarded with social media and other forms of technology, the feeling of true isolation can still be overwhelming. One experience that comes to mind is that of being lost in the wilderness. I remember reading about a hiker who had gotten separated from his group and lost in the mountains. He had no food or water and was completely alone for days. He tried to signal for help, but no one came. As the days went by, he became increasingly weak and disoriented. Eventually, he was found, but the experience had a profound impact on him. He talked about how the feeling of being completely alone and isolated was one of the most terrifying things he had ever experienced. The thought of being lost in the wilderness with no means of rescue or communication is a chilling one. While many of us may never experience such extreme isolation, the feeling of being cut off from others is something that many people struggle with, especially during times of stress or hardship. It's important to remember that we are not alone, and to reach out for help and support when we need it. Let me know your stories in the comments to be part of a future video. Like and subscribe to be notified of new uploads, and click on this video to hear more stories.